ChatGPT has been released this month and it's phenomenal. If you haven't heard of ChatGPT, I guarantee you this will not be the last time you're going to hear that phrase. It is a chat engine that's been released by a consortium from an entity called OpenAI. It uses natural language processing to great effect to create outputs. The chat interface is very easy to use, and most importantly, the dataset that underpins ChatGPT is just amazing. This video is just a primer. It's a basic introduction to ChatGPT, but if there's one piece of advice that I do want to give you guys, it's to get into it now. Go and have a play with it. It's very, very simple. Bit of history. In 2015, several entities and tech entrepreneurs, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Microsoft, Infosys, and a few other entities came together, invested over $1 billion, and have been creating a series of what we call APIs, or application programming interfaces. Just recently, in the 30th of November of 2022, they have connected this to a chatbot, and you can type natural sentences into ChatGPT and it will respond. Not only will it respond to the questions you put to it, it will remember and be able to analyze the questions that you've asked and be able to express things back. So in this video, I'm going to go and step through a few of the very, very basic use cases for ChatGPT, but I challenge you all to get into it, have a play, and you'll quickly see that this is quite a spectacular piece of software. So to get started with ChatGPT, simply go to chat.openai.com. It's going to take you to their loading screen. You have the option to log in if you've got an existing account or to sign up. If we click to sign up, it's just going to ask us either for one of our authentications with one of the big providers, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, or we can just enter an email address in here. Once you've gone through and done that, it will then take you to, you then have to go to your own email and you'll have to click to verify your email address there. OpenAI uses a two-factor authentication, which is pretty commonplace these days. It'll ask you to verify a real phone number as well. Once you've done each of those steps, you'll get to the main login screen. Here we are. This is the ChatGPT interface, and down the bottom is where we can start having conversations. So I recommend when you first get into ChatGPT, just start asking it questions. It doesn't matter what you ask, it's going to have a little think about it and respond. And the way that it responds, as it's doing on the screen now, is line by line at a good reading pace. Note that while you can type things on the bottom, you can't ask it for more questions while it's going through and analyzing and responding to what you've asked it. You ask in natural language and it will continue until it finishes or until it reaches a character limit. If you have asked it for something that's quite long, it may go for a certain period of time and then stop, and then you have to ask it to continue or to finish. Also note that if you're starting a new chat, it will automatically come and label up in the top left-hand corner. It really is this simple. Now, one of the very important features of ChatGPT that really sets it aside from the field is the fact that it will continue the same conversation using the information that it's already provided and the questions you've already asked. Here, for example, we've asked for a recipe for lasagna, and we're just going to ask it, can you make it vegetarian? And it's going to respond. If it can't respond, And there are some situations where that's going to happen. If you've asked some sort of inappropriate questions, or if the internal logic is somehow getting very confused, it'll tell you, and usually in a very polite way, but it will remember things that you ask it to do for the purposes of this conversation and this conversation only. So after this recipe is finished, we can ask it, can you give me recipe for carbonara. We can ask it for a different recipe. So here, carbonara. Now, we asked for a recipe for lasagna, and then vegetarian. Then we're asking for carbonara. So at this stage, it's not going to use the fact that we asked for a vegetarian option for this particular recipe, but we could ask it to make all of the recipes for this particular chat to be vegetarian, for example. It will remember that piece of information. Here we can ask it for a recipe for gnocchi, for example. Or here, it's automatically going through and answering the question about the carbonara. One of the neat things about this is that you're not going to know what it is that you're going to get back. ChatGPT is a natural language processor. It doesn't know. It's not using symbols per se. It's just going through its massive amount of data and finding patterns and connections between those things to provide you this information. Sometimes you're going to ask it to do things that are contradictory. Here, for example, we're asking it to have a steak cooked rare, but also all recipes vegetarian. So it's going to go through and try to resolve this, and it didn't give a perfect answer. And so you will find when using this that there are limits to it. It can't do the logically impossible. Other things to note here is that the chat that you've got is going to limit all of the training, so to speak, that you've done with it with this particular chat. So here, can you recommend a vegetarian substitute? And so it is going to go away and try and come up with a list of options to resolve your queries. This is a pretty basic example, and it's a little long-winded because the responses are quite long. I'm going to look at some more precise code-based questions in a second. So to start a new chat, click the new chat button. It'll take you back to that original load screen, and we can get typing. Here, we're going to get it to write some code. Write a method that takes 3 integers and sums the 2 biggest. Okay, it's going to plot away. Here it's defaulting to Python. So in terms of coding, you can ask it to do and produce code in any of the language that it's familiar with. It does say that Python is its preferred language, its native tongue, so to speak. But in my experience, it's equally proficient at the other major languages as well. Now, one of the amazing things about this is that it will not just do the code, it'll also comment it as well. It's an amazing thing that it's going to go through, and really quite a transformative technology. We can also ask it to switch language. So can you please write this in C# instead? It's very polite. Again, the internal logic is the same. It's just going to refactor it in the language that you ask it for. Now, this is quite long-winded. I wonder if we could ask it to make this a little bit shorter. And again, you can actually start typing. Refactor this code to make it more condensed. And it's going to try. Sometimes if you ask it to do tasks, to make things smaller, to make things larger, it'll give you a little warning or an explanation. And so here, for example, rather than using the simple mathematical operators, it's using the system.math library. And so that's noticeably shorter than this one up here. I'm going to show you possibly the most exciting feature of ChatGPT, which is its ability to generate natural text. And it can take instructions and expand and condense those in ordinary language. It's quite remarkable. So if we start a new chat, what I'm going to do here is actually to copy and paste an assignment that I wrote for a class that I taught a few years ago. This was a stage 1 contract law assignment from a subject a few years ago, and it is going to go through, analyze it, and come up with some form of answer. Now, this is remarkable for any person who's watching this who happens to be an educator, and anything that requires any form of assignments or essays to be drafted. You may or may not have noted a trend over the last 10 years in terms of the quality at undergraduate level, in terms of their assignments. They've got worse, particularly in terms of grammar and punctuation and spelling. Now, this is just written an assignment. Now, this isn't very long. What you can do, though, is say, please answer in 1,000 words and explain the rules in more depth. Here, it's going to go away and explain the rules, which was part of the problem question. It might be a little bit scary for an educator who hasn't been paying attention to this, watching this happen now, that a person can copy and paste your assignment into a chatbot and it can spit out a functional but not completely correct assignment. This is going to mean a lot more time and effort is going to be taken in marking and grading papers over the next year or 3. Until there are systems in place that can go through and to check these things. What this is going to mean for students, and this is a very important point, is that you must note on your assignments that you have used ChatGPT or a similar AI tool in order to generate, in part, the text in your document. This is a tool to be used. It's a legitimate tool, but it can't replace the reasoning or the thought process that takes place in terms of answering these forms of assessment. And if you are doing it to do that, then really that's just flat out cheating. So my recommendation is to cite the fact that you've used this particular source. Note there that this was quite long, and so just typing continue will ask ChatGPT to carry on where it left off. This, again, for educators that are watching this go through, if you are familiar with the content, you'll note that this some of these things aren't quite right, or at least they're not stated in a particular way. So here, for example, it's talking about being able to sue for damages for innocent misrepresentation, which isn't the case, certainly not in most jurisdictions in Australia where I am. But nonetheless, it does form a good scaffold in terms of the underlying task that it's been asked to do. Now, in terms of the structure, this is sort of an assignment or essay structure, but we can ask it, can you please rewrite this in IRAC style? And so it's going to break each of these into the underlying legal issue, the appropriate rules, and an explanation of those rules, the application step, and then conclusion at the end of that. And so this is a very common undergraduate task that is given to law students, and it's an important skill for them to have to learn. And the chatbot can do this pretty well. It certainly can do it quite well in separating these things out. It's not quite so good in situations where it's a little confused about what the underlying law is, because law in our jurisdiction is a combination of what we call common law, judge-made law, and statute, pieces of legislation. It can sometimes get confused about what judges are saying in regards to the underlying statutes because the two interact. However, it's pretty good, and educators ought to be aware that this is going to produce quite often quite passable work, or at least work that could be that would need to be sourced in terms of putting citations in, that could itself be passable. So again, you could ask it to rewrite this, or please include the words citation needed after each rule. And it'll, again, go through and rewrite that. And you, as a student, it'll give you the opportunity to go through and find where the sources of each of those laws or rules are. And one of the things, interestingly, that ChatGPT won't do, at least won't do it directly, is to tell you how its algorithm to obtain that information works. It's a little opaque in terms of that, and I think that's by design. Now, this is a good thing for undergraduate law students because you're then given the opportunity to go off, find those appropriate rules, and you almost certainly will find that the chat that's functionally done this boilerplate for your assignment may not have explained the rules particularly well. So I think there's a real opportunity there for you to obtain a deeper level of understanding of the underlying rules in doing that. But just note that you won't be able to get it off the bat to copy and paste an entire assignment and spit out an entire answer without some amount of thought going into it. I hope this video has been useful. I do recommend that you create an account and get into using ChatGPT right now. The technology won't wait, and you would be well served to be aware of it, aware of the benefits, aware of the limitations. And I think, like myself, you'll recognize pretty soon when you start to use it that this is a breathtaking piece of technology. Like and subscribe if you'd like me to create more content like this. See you next time.